And three, two. Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Joel Silva. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is great
Yeah,
to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. As soon as I saw Seeds of War, it was like 2 seconds, and I believe it was when you were first publishing it a while ago, and I saw the cover. I'm like, yep, and then I saw the blurb, and I'm like, yep. So I just went and I don't remember if I pre-ordered or what I did, but I definitely did not wait very long in that book. And I had a bunch of friends read it, like on social media and stuff like that, authors and book reviewers and stuff. And they're like, dude, this is like a totally a book for you. So I'm like really, really excited. Like I said, before we got, recorded, that's on my TBR for 2024. A couple people are asking me about where's the video. And I'm like, I'm trying now that I'm healthy. I'll hopefully get to it really soon. But yeah, you're on there. So I'm really excited to have you on and excited to pick your brain today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, thanks for the support as well by getting the book, and I hope you can get to it in 2024.
Oh no, I definitely will. I had another friend the other day who is an author friend of mine. I forget who was. I was talking to a couple people about it, and then they're like, "Yeah, you gotta do the prequel too." So well, that's fine. But yeah, I was like, they keep reminding me that it needs to stick in, within the next like few months of 2024. So I definitely have you on there. I was trying to get you on last year, and it was just like the craziest year of my life with my son being born. So it was kind
Oh
of
yeah.
like out of the question. But yeah, but. I got you penciled in and actually penned in on my list, so we'll be all good to go. And that kind of leads us into like our first question there. I'm curious at what your writing journey has been like up until this point.
Yeah, so I think that's a kind of a multi-layered answer for
Oh
me
yeah.
because I mean, I guess it's common for a writer to have multi-layered answers for this because on one hand, it's when I didn't write seriously enough, and then once I started taking writing seriously. And if I go back to like when I really got involved with writing and when I really started to feel like I could do something about it, even though it wasn't super serious, I have to go all the way back to like maybe middle school because I grew up in Portugal, and for the Portuguese classes, which would be the equivalent of like English classes for you guys, we had to write these like mini essays about just random topics, and that would be 300 words maybe, just for like exams every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or something. And I was pretty good at that, and I always got really good grades at that. And I always really looked forward to these exams, as weird as it may sound, because I had the opportunity to write about a prompt. Like it was a prompt, and I could write about it, and it was really liberating and really free. And that together with the fact that I was just devouring books growing up from all the way from like middle grade, and then I did all the Harry Potter ones, and then Aragon, and then I jumped to Lord of the Rings. So yeah, it's just been a big passion since a really long time. But at the same time, I had a gap in between, which is, I guess it's for some people it's also pretty common, which
Yeah.
was when I was in high school and then in college, which is when I was in high school, like one of my teachers was the Portuguese teacher was quite snobbish. So unless
Mm.
you're reading the classics or unless you're reading something that's super supposedly literary, you're just reading garbage. And then if you decide to read these garbage books for your coursework, then you're not going to get good grades at all. And it's going to be, why would I be setting myself up for failure when I
Yeah.
know that all I have to do is read some literary books to please the teacher, and that's fine. So at the time, I was very discouraged. I didn't really read much fantasy when I was in high school. To be honest, also in Portugal, you couldn't really find a lot of fantasy books at the time. We don't really have a big tradition of fantasy books, and the ones we had are like the big names, maybe like Tolkien, and then you have Harry Potter and like Aragon and things like that. And then I went to college, and then the snobbery became even worse because everyone that I was around, they were just reading all the literary big names and everything like that. And I kind of, in my weird way of trying to fit in, I kind of like started reading those books as well instead of keeping up with fantasy. And then eventually I came back to the UK. Sorry, I came to the UK to live. I've been here for about 8 years now, and one of my friends for my birthday gave me The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
Oh, nice.
And I picked that up. I was like, I haven't read a fantasy book maybe in like 10 years now. And I hadn't really written much. Like I had tried to write books, maybe like thrillers and other kind of like more literary stuff, but I really wasn't going anywhere with it. And then after reading Name of the Wind, it just opened the floodgates for me in terms of like all the fantasy books that I hadn't read in a long time. Like I was somehow catching up to everything
Yeah, yeah.
that I had missed for the past 10 years. And then being immersed in those books again, like Sanderson, Joe Abercrombie, and all those big names that are my inspirations, uh, I started getting the itch to write again. And like my life was stable. I had a steady job. I had my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. So like life was stable again. I wasn't really too worried about, how am I going to get a job, out of college or something like that. Like life was stable. So I started giving writing a shot, and it started really slowly, maybe like once or twice a week. I would sit down to write, and then at some point, I finished the book for the first time. It was not good at all, but I had that accomplishment, that sense of accomplishment that I had finished the book, even though I knew it wasn't good. I finished it, and at the time, I was like, maybe I could try something with this. Like maybe I could take this a bit more seriously. This is something I enjoy. Like I completely lose the track of time when I'm sitting down to write, and I just enjoy this kind of feeling of catharsis that it creates. So yeah, so that's really how it went. And then from then on, I went a bit more serious about it. I did a lot of research, tried to kind of hone my craft, and did a bunch of like online workshops, and I watched all the Sanderson lectures and things like that. So yeah, that's really how my journey has been so far.
I gotta say, so as a teacher, it just drives me nuts when I hear stories like yours because I never realized as a kid, especially in middle school, like how awesome of teachers I had. Because I had two teachers that were like, we don't care what you're reading. Like I was at a higher level than most people, and they're reading like books like that thick, like The Giver or something. And I asked my seventh grade teacher, I was like, she's like, you just don't worry about it. And I think I had read it like the year or two before, actually, in like fifth or sixth grade. And she like asked me questions, I like tested out or whatever. I was like, it was a great book. I was really surprised. But yeah, so she's like, well, why everybody else does this? She goes, you can go here and here. And I was reading like those thick Star Wars books, and I'd go through like one a week. And I was like, well, can I just do this? And she's like, yeah, totally. She's like, you're going to be reading, three or four times as much as everybody else is. And then I finished those for a while, and they were still on The Giver. So because we didn't have like an honors like class in middle school, so I was like, okay. And I was like, I think they were like almost three-fourths the way through the book. I was like, can I read it again? So I read it again. So after that, she like I think trusted me even more and just let me pick whatever, which was really nice. My mom and dad were not like restrictive.
Yeah,
And yeah, then eighth grade came along. I had another just one of the best teachers I've ever had, and she was absolutely amazing. And she's like, yeah, you can
yeah.
do any book, and you just pick the project. So it just
I
hurts me
would
when
love
I
to have
hear
something like
people.
that because
Yeah,
I know a lot of people that I was in class with in middle school and high school, and they just stopped reading altogether because the books that they were being forced to read and the books that they were kind of being pushed to read, they just didn't have interest in these books, and they didn't have
yeah,
the maybe like the reading level to tackle these books. And it's just like soul crushing when you're being forced to read something you're not really enjoying.
yep,
But if you let them read whatever they like, maybe they will get to that reading level that one day they'll be able to read the books that you want them to read. So it's like,
yep.
I really wish I had had teachers that were, like that. Like they would let us read whatever we want.
I always
And
reference this one kid with other teachers because we do a lot of workshops and stuff. I've had some leadership roles in school and several of them. And I've tried to tell people like I had a kid in eighth grade. When I first taught my first year was in Arizona. I moved down there, met my wife, and yeah, I was going and I was just trying to find any book that they'd be interested in. And I remember I had this two students that read Ender's Game and they didn't want to read anything. I'm like, guys, just look at the back, read the first chapter. So both of them read it, were hooked. Well, one of them ended up contacted me. This was probably like almost 10 years ago. He contacted me 2 years ago and he said, hey, how's it going? He's like, I don't know if you remember me. I'm like, I remember you, for sure. It's one of my favorite kids. And he goes, I just want you to know I'm in, like, this was last year. He's like, I'm in year three at ASU. And now this past year would have been his like last year. So this spring he'll be graduating. He's the first anybody like person in either side of his family to ever go to college, let alone like finish. And he's like, it all
Wow,
started with that book that you gave me, Ender's Game. He went and read that one, read Xenocide, and then just kept going. And to me, that's like one of my greatest like book accomplishments. Like I could write something all
that's
day,
awesome.
yeah, to me like sell things, but that like I still have that copy of that book. I kept it separate from the other ones, and I show it to other teachers and stuff at time I go to do stuff. I'm like, please don't be like this teacher, like what does it matter really as long as they're reading and I agree with you. I think there's some times where it's like I like certain, classic books or literary books that, I got in high school, but there were plenty I hated. Like I hated The Great Gatsby, I hated The Scarlet Letter. I loved like Hamlet and stuff like that. Shakespeare's like my jam. But there were other ones where like, I couldn't stand it. I usually left like the fantasy books like Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, things like that for the weekends. Like I get my work done and that was like my goal or, my
Yeah,
reward or something like that. But it always hurts me when I hear from that because I'm like, I feel like you're just stifling creativity or future authors, you know what I mean? And a lot of
yeah,
authors have come on here in particular and have the same story as you and, had that gap and things. I had that gap just because of college and stuff. And, same thing like getting a job, got two masters, things like that. I still wrote in between and
yeah,
read, but probably not as much as, if I was, had some extra free time. But yeah, I totally understand that feeling. So
yeah,
it's a shame when it happens, but at least you came back. That's what I always tell myself. So
yeah. I mean, I'm really glad I came back, to be honest.
well, I'm sure that I will be glad once I read Seeds of War and I'll be demanding book two. Like a lot of people I've seen on social media for you. So I'm sure everybody is glad that you came back this way. Speaking of which, what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
Yeah, so that's a good question because there's a side of me that doesn't really like being pigeonholed in a specific genre or something like
Yep.
that because I always like to have the creative freedom to kind of delve between genres. But at the same time, I also know that the genre that I'm probably the most comfortable in is fantasy. I mean, in fantasy, it's been like my first love, really. Like in terms of genres, it's the first genre I've ever read, and I think I've read more fantasy books than any books in other genres. So fantasy is probably where I'm the most comfortable. But strangely enough, the first two short stories that I've ever published were sci-fi. Well,
Oh,
I mean, kind of a blend of sci-fi and fantasy with a bit of fantasy in them. But I mean, essentially, aesthetically, they're sci-fi stories. And this is something that I haven't really kind of explored too much because people haven't asked or like I just haven't really published anything. But I also do write a bit of horror as well.
oh, cool.
So yeah, so those are like the three main genres. But to be honest, like I wouldn't uh exclude maybe like exploring other stuff like thrillers or mystery novels or even literary stuff. Like it's just that I have way too many ideas and not enough time to do them all. And it's already hard enough to build kind of a readership and a platform within a specific genre. And if you're already doing that, why don't you just keep going in the genre that you're working in and the one that
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
that you're building? Because obviously, if I'm known for my fantasy novels, but then I publish something that's like literary or something, I don't know how many of my current readers will transition and
yep.
and how many I'm going to be able to get if I switch it up. So it's always a bit of a hard thing to be able to do, but I would probably say that confidently I'll still be I'll still be writing epic fantasy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I was just talking to Luke Schultz about this actually, because he's going to be branching out. Well, we talked about in our interview last night actually, where he's thinking about branching out. He's got different ideas, and him and I are very similar in style, where it's like feel like we'll get burnt out if we're just in one line the whole time. And I totally get like before I used to think, oh no, I'm just gonna do fantasy because of, building a platform, stuff like this. I've saved a lot of books up though and stories up where I'm actually starting like a dual thing in fantasy and then in urban fantasy. I have a sci-fi book that's like about halfway done with the like draft one. It's like just like a mech marine thing. Just I love Warhammer stuff like that. So just I don't
Nice.
know, the big suits and stuff is just fun to me. But like we talked with a lot, I've talked with a lot of different people and like tried to plan it out where like I'd have like really from now till next year, I'm gonna probably put out at least 6 or 7 books, including well four, and then including my 3 novellas, like pickle novellas, just to get my audience and name out there, and then I'll just kind of pop over and then kind of do like a thing back and forth. But that took a long time of like writing, and I have so many books that are like half finished where I could just finish them up, in a summer, be a little quicker about it. But it was a very difficult thing to decide. But at the same time, I was like, I love reading a bunch of different books and different genres. So I don't know, I've seen a couple people do it really successfully. So I'm hoping that I talked to enough of them and learned enough to kind of go from there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do think I don't want people to follow me though, because I feel like your way is smarter. You build way more of an audience, but who
I
knows?
mean, like, to be
Maybe I'll get
honest,
lucky.
like if I find myself with some free time this summer, I already have a lot of outlines, like really complete outlines for all these sorts of different novels already planned. So I might just need like 3 months of not having deadlines for my
Yeah,
fantasy
yeah,
stuff to just crank out a bunch of them and then just send them to beta readers and get them ready.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would probably be in a position at some point to just have a novella like, or a novel of horror or something out there without warning anyone before. So that's completely possible.
Well, it's funny you mentioned novellas because I actually have John Scalzi, his new one, The Dispatcher, and I just
Oh,
randomly saw it. My friend's like, "Is that new?" I'm like, "It must be," and it's like tells that line between like I always think of Total Recall, those kind of things, where it's kind of like blended sci-fi with like just some interesting stuff, and then Minority Report. And I started going through it, and I was like, "Oh man, it's like a really good book." I'm like addicted to novellas lately. But it's funny because I had a lot of people say like, "Oh, you could combine your prequel novellas into one book." I'm like, but there's going to be actual books for the whole series, like Iron Druid Chronicles from Kevin Hearn, I think, is going to be one of the closest I can say. Like Dresden Files, but without the detective spot. But like, I actually talked to some authors, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to work with these 3 novellas. I actually have a series of them before the main series. I left like several years of like a gap. But they were like 3 of them were like out of like 10 were like, oh, I actually only like to read novellas right now because I'm writing so much. And they actually encouraged me, gave me a lot of encouragement saying like I think you might actually do well. So I don't
right.
know. It's kind of interesting, but I think that a lot of people forget about novellas, but there have been so many great ones lately. Like Anthony Ryan has his Pilgrim of Swords. Oh my gosh, it is one of the best. Like I think there's 5 right now out of 6 out, and I mean I just devoured them. They're only about 90 to 100 pages, but he does more in each novella with world building, characterization, and a story than most people do in like 100,000 words. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. Like I think you could also think about different markets as that too. I think a novella is like a separate market, within these
yeah,
or a mini market within, same as like Audible, things like that. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm a
definitely.
huge novella fan. So when you came out with yours, I was I actually have that on my list too. And I'd already made my TBR for last year, this year, and I was like, I gotta figure out how to sneak this in somewhere. So, but yeah, definitely love mixing it up because I love seeing different stories from people. So I always find that interesting. All right, so what has been your greatest triumph in your career so far?
Greatest triumph, I guess, would be I think the book launch went really, really well in May. Um, the first week, I could really see like from the moment I launched the book, that week was just like I was just feeling like in the clouds pretty much because so many people picked up the book. So many people were commenting everything that I was posting. So many people
Yeah,
were like letting me know that I'm reading it, I'm liking it, I'm enjoying it. And I worked so hard just on marketing for the months, like 3 or 4 months prior to the release, and then to see it all come to fruition, and then I even had to like do some last minute edits, like and proofreading and stuff like that, and still wasn't perfect, by the way. But but yeah, like that first week, the reception was just really, really good,
yeah.
and I'm still chasing that high again, like gone over the past few 6 or 7 months. I'm still chasing that because that it was just so good to see people enjoying the book and picking it up. And I could say like my other triumphs would have been like, like when I got my 200th review on Goodreads or like something like that, or my first 100 ratings on Amazon or something like that. But to be honest, like those are just numbers. Like I'm a lot happier when I see the buzz, when I see the people are talking about it and enjoying it. That really makes me feel accomplished and makes me feel like I did something right, or at least, like when you're first, this is my debut. So like when I was looking to publish, I had no idea if this is going to be something that people would enjoy or not. Like you always have that, on one hand, confidence that people will like it and it's going to be a hit, but at the same time, you always have the other side, which is like, this is going to be total garbage. No one's going to pick this up, and it's going to be, it's not going to be good at all. So you sort of need that validation, that initial validation from readers. Like, I don't really care about, like other people that are like agents or, to be validated by traditional publishing or something like that. But I do care about what readers think. Like I care about them enjoying it. And it's to have that at least once, to have at least one
Yep.
or two or three like people saying that they read it and they really liked it, that means everything to me, honestly. Because that's really all I'm doing it. I'm doing it for them, like I could just write the books, keep them in a Word document in my computer, and just keep them for myself. But I'm publishing them because I think that there's people out there who might like it. And that's, I mean, I've always said that that's also why I keep the books so cheap. Like since the beginning, it's always been like, at least on the Amazon website, it's always been at 99 cents, because I just want it to be cheap. Like I don't want price to be a barrier between me and the readers. It's like, and I did some free promos as well, like just giving out the book for free for people to pick it up, just read it. And I hope they enjoy it. And so yeah, just to really like once again go to your question, uh, the first week I think was the my highest triumph. I mean, I'm still early days in the career. I hope there will be other highs like that at some point, but so far I think that has been the highest point.
Well, I gotta say, in terms of like your first week, like I mean, I follow a lot of people. I'm in a lot of places. I like to be everywhere and get all the news and stuff. It's easier to find good books and good authors that way. But I have to say, like you are absolutely on my feed everywhere. I mean, it could have been Instagram, it could have been Facebook. I'm in a bunch of groups there. Your book was being shared. Seeds of War was being shared everywhere. Twitter, I think, was the biggest one. I mean, I every like third or fourth post was Seeds of War, I think within the first 3 days. And I was like, oh, glad I bought that. Um, and that's why I put your name down for future interviews for this year. But yeah, it must have been like almost a month. I mean, I saw you like everywhere I turned. You're probably only one of three books I can say honestly, or I think one was a novella and your book, and then there's another book, and I'm totally blanking on the other ones, but it was just funny. I interviewed one of them, and I was like, I saw your book everywhere, and you're the only three that I can really say within the last 2 years that that's been the case for. Some you hit Twitter alone, but to be all over each of the platforms. I saw people sharing on TikTok, so really four major platforms. So that was really cool to see. I just kept sharing. I always love that buzz for people. It just feels good to try and feel the flame, so to speak. And then, it's like I do the podcast. I've had a lot of interviews from the last 2 years where people have, made it really far into the SPFBO, or, a couple people have won different awards, which has been really, really cool. And maybe it's the teacher. I mean, I don't know, but I just love to see people successful. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
really fun just to see the buzz around Seeds of War. So I was like super cool.
thanks. It was really fun because I got in touch with a lot of reviewers really early on, like, would you like to read my book? There's no commitments whatsoever. You pick it up if you want to. And then I was lucky enough that a few of them picked it up quite early on, and the word started to spread and just went like wildfire. People were just getting reviews from other people, and they were like, "Oh, I got this as well. Maybe I'll see what this is about." And it just caught fire in the first week, and that was really really cool.
That's super cool. I do agree with you too with like the 99 cent thing. Like like I've had book stuff to pay for. I've had, all sorts of stuff pop up this year, and my son and my wife. I have a surgery coming out for like my root canal. I had like a weird nerve thing. So just like every time I turn around, and I just like I'm like I so get that. And it's like I usually only buy right now, unless someone sends me something, I usually only buy 99-cent books. Just I'll save like three a month or something, not get maybe five, not getting a coffee one day, just making coffee, at home for the month, I'll just put $5 aside or something like that. So I've thought about that a lot too, especially with my novellas. I'm like, I don't really care, honestly, about my friends all keep asking about making the profit back. I have been able to, fortunately, because done the podcast, I've had people who I've helped for years who went and helped me. Corey Ratliff did my cover, just such a great guy. He actually did my cover for all three novellas. And
Yeah.
but that's what I was talking about. Community, I think, is cooler than anything. Just being part of the community, particularly indie, I think is just more exciting than for me than sales. Like just to be like on everybody's level, with having some things
Yeah.
published and things like that.
I mean,
Feeling like
it's
I made it,
even,
if that makes sense. But
yeah, I mean, you're completely right. And I think it's like even if you were thinking about sales, like it's really hard to sell books as an indie author without the community because you don't have the promotion that the traditional published authors do. Like you don't have the shelf space for physical books on Amazon, sorry, on Barnes and Noble and Waterstones
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
UK. So it's like, you're only on Amazon. So after a few weeks or a few months, your book will not show up in the search
Yep.
results because Amazon just bears you with more recent content. So the only way to sell it is to engage with the community and get people to read your book and get them to share and to engage with you on social media. That's really, I think, the only way. Like, I mean, you guess you can also pay for ads on Facebook, on Amazon and stuff, but the cheapest way is just to get involved with the community. Like,
Yep.
yeah,
Well, there's so many times where people ask me, they're like, and it's not that I don't mind people asking for things. I guess sometimes it's like how people ask, if that makes sense. Um, like some people I never talk to, they'll never subscribe to this channel or any of them. And I'm like, if you like, usually I'll help anybody out for anything, but when I'm really slammed, it's like if you came up to me or like, oh hey, can you do this thing? And that's where a couple people recently were like, hey, I know you're slammed, but if you don't mind. And I'm like, well, yeah, you've helped me out and just been cool, really just been cool. And just funny or, built a great relationship with them. I'm like, yeah, no problem. They caught me in time where I like rearranged a couple things because they had due dates and stuff that were really important for this year. I have no problem helping them out. But, again, it's like how they asked, like they, first of all, respect the fact that I do this, they know I have,
yeah,
a pretty crazy job, for the state with teaching and stuff, like they just are like, they know me, you know what I mean? And I feel like a couple people like asked to help me from that group recently, which was really cool. I've had a couple authors that I helped who were like, "Oh, can I art read for you?" I'm like, "Sure." I'm like, "As soon as I can get it, I'll send you, I'll send you a copy on Kindle or whatever." Probably be a while for paperbacks there, but it was just cool, to not even have to ask. Like people just
yeah,
automatically, like I was like, "Hey, do you mind if I pay you or do this?" And a lot of people were like, "Nah, just give me X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "That's ridiculously cheap." And that's where I was like, well, if I sell a bunch or whatever, I was like, I'm gonna give you a bonus or something. Like Corey's one of those people. Give me three beautiful covers for not very much. He's just one of those guys too who's always trying to help people out, which is just awesome. And you
yeah,
want to help those kind of people out too. So yeah, but I
absolutely.
I definitely think community. That's where like I went and met, like, speaking of Patrick Rothfuss, I met Patrick Rothfuss right when In the Name of the Wind came out. It must have been like three
Oh,
weeks. I met Brandon Sanderson. That was the same year at the same conference, or same book signing at the Poison Pen, where Way of Kings had just came out. And then I hadn't even read one of his books. I just went and was like, oh, sounds cool. Met Kevin Hearn in person. He was an absolute delight. Just a cool guy. I met Brian McKellen on his first book, and just like I met Michael J. Sullivan. He was on like book four or something like that. um
nice.
right after like Thefts of Swords, something like that. I mean, there's just so many cool people. I actually met Pierce Brown too, which I always forget. And I started reading Red Rising. I was like, I totally met him. And somewhere I got to find the copy of the book he signed. But I found a couple the other day. I forgot those people were there. There were probably like 22 authors there, like just stacking up the whole place. And it was super cool. But a lot of the indie authors, like Kevin actually invited indie authors and like regular industry or whatever, and like traditional. And I just couldn't believe how cool everybody was. But indie, by far on the indie side of the room, they were just like, dude, we just come to help each other out and have fun. And can't remember who it was, but one of them was like, go check out so and so's book, that book, and then come back. And I noticed they all reviewed each other's books, and they like really. I was at that thing. I'd been there from 9 a.m. to probably like 8:30 at night. I went in three or four, and this place was packed. I went in three or four times. Went and bought some more books, brought some more in, and just talked to people for a long time at the end. And just the vibe I got from the indie community was just awesome. So at the time I was working on stuff, I was like, I think I'm gonna do indie instead. And people were like, oh, you're crazy. And
Yeah.
then that all of a sudden, a lot of things have shot up and changed from them. But I would say in terms of indie community, in my opinion, it's just gotten better, with the
Oh
camaraderie
yeah.
and helping each other out, which has been really cool. So I totally agree with you. I think that people always ask me like, how do I do this? I'm like, anytime it's someone's birthday, just to be nice, I'm like, hey, happy birthday. Or if someone has a
Mm.
release, I'm like, hey, give me this, or I'll share that, and just even just telling people, hey, this sounds really cool. I'm gonna buy it and read it, and then after you read
Yeah.
it, be like, hey, this was awesome. Like Tim Akers is one. He has these two amazing novellas, Silver and the Pale Sword, and Prophet of a Blind God. I gotta say, they're absolutely amazing. So I tell them too. I'm like, comment or message or tag them. I'm like, these books are amazing. I want people to read them. So I definitely agree with you. Like it's just a lot more fun when you can be with people. And I feel like we do a lonely thing. So,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
nice to do
it's
interviews with people and just like hang out and share in
yeah,
something that you love to do. So,
yeah,
which
exactly.
really leads me to our fourth question, which I gotta say is my absolute favorite. So, what is your series, The Smoke Sis, about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So the Smokesmiths is an epic fantasy series. I currently have book one out with a prequel novella, and book two is supposed to come out in a few months. Shouldn't be too much longer. And I have at least one more book planned in the
Oh,
series,
nice.
but I think I will have two more novellas somewhere in between them, books two and three.
Oh, awesome.
And then I might also have books beyond book three. So I'm still not really sure. I haven't really planned it out.
Yeah.
It depends on how neatly I can wrap up the whole, storyline on book three. But at least book three, I will have it for sure, but I might have more planned out. What is the series about? The series is just an epic fantasy. It's a bit gritty and dark. Like I don't know if some people call it grim dark. I don't know if it can be considered grim dark. And to be honest, I just let my readers decide. Like I'm not really interested in attaching labels. It's just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I call it epic fantasy, and it is epic fantasy. And then the rest people can just figure it out themselves. But you have pretty kind of non-sympathetic characters, or at least they have pretty big flaws, and they do like things that are very morally questionable, and they're always within the line of being irredeemable or redeemable. Like, can they still be redeemable even though they did this and that? So there's always I like to be on that line, but I also like to explain why they're on that line and why they do what they do, and all of that has is motivated by their backstories and their pasts. And I think ultimately that's what the series is about. Like I like exploring the pasts of people that are less fortunate. Like I like underdog stories, and the the characters that I write, they're all sort of like in leadership positions, like the three main point of view characters. But they had to really work hard and pave a long and hard road to get to where they are. And they had to do things that, you know, are not the best things. And they have a lot of skeletons in their closet and demons that they have to deal with. And the road ahead is not much easier for them, I have to say. So it's ultimately, I think, for me, it's about exploring how people who don't come from much, and they come from very humble beginnings, and they go through hardships in life, how they react to the world and to the situations that they're in based on different personalities and based on their different mindsets, and basically how their past shaped them to be the way that they are. And one thing that I'm not sure if a lot of readers have picked up on this, but one thing that I think connects them all is the fact that they're all displaced. So they're all not homeless, but they're all struggling with the concept of what is home. And that's essentially from my own experience as a as an immigrant here in the UK. Like I came from Portugal. I had to, come to a country where I didn't have anyone, didn't have any support system, didn't have any jobs lined up or anything like that. And the first few months or maybe years were tough. So, like obviously I didn't live in a grim dark world or like in a gritty world where people just kill each other all the time, but uh, I know how hard it can be for people to adjust to uh, you know situations where they don't really know what home is. And
Yeah.
so with my one of the characters, she's building a home for herself. She wants it to be safe. She wants it to thrive in a settlement town that she just founded. And the other one is a mercenary. He's like really old. He's already on his the last third of his life. He's already in his 60s, and he was kind of an orphan that got picked up early on to become a smokesmith, which is like a magic user that uses smoke. And he got taken away from his home and from his parents and from everyone. So he also doesn't really know the concept of a home.
Mm.
And the third one is a guy who also got became orphaned quite early on, had to become like an urchin in the city and become a thief. So they're all sort of like trying to figure out what home means for them and just trying to figure that out. And the book is also about found family. I think it's something that is somewhat related to the lack of a home. Like
Yeah.
when you're put into hard situations with people and they're going through the same hardships as you are, then you immediately bond with them a
Yeah.
lot harder than you would otherwise. So I like to really delve into that. So all of the characters that I'm writing, even though they're all sort of like three different plot lines in a way, even though they sort of connect some ways or another, but they all have their own little troops and gangs of friends that are really close, not necessarily family, but they have really strong friendships and really unique friendships, I would say. So yeah, I guess that's what the book is about. It's about that sort of like displacement and concept of a home and just finding family beyond your immediate family members. And that's on a more theme level. But if you want to take it as a lighter read, you can do that as well. You have sword fights, you have smoke magic, you have dangerous creatures, you have just really epic battles. If I may say. So I think it's really up to the reader. Like I think I have a bit for everyone to enjoy in the book. Like I have mystery subplots, I have little hints of romance here and there, like very light. I have, like uh what I would imagine is quiet moments. We also have really action-packed scenes. So I think there's something there for everyone to enjoy. Yeah.
I gotta say, I love the concept of found family. I was talking to Luke about this last night, where he likes to dissect different like stories and things, which I think we all do as writers, but I like to actually dissect characters. Like one, I do character studies. One I absolutely love was like Chuck Norris in Walker, Texas Ranger. As a kid, I thought, oh, this guy's so cool. He's just kicking people in the face. But then as an adult, this past year with my son, we were home a lot for paternity leave and stuff. Um, so it was free on Roku channel or whatever. So started rewatching it, and I just could not believe how complex of a character he was. And like I think that was something too, like a theme where he had like his uncle, but everybody else in his life was a found family. And then I thought about it for, like Star Wars. I'm like, what I really like about him? Like the Force is cool, don't get me wrong, but the fact that like, yeah, Leia and Luke are brother and sister, but like with him, Han, Lando, and Chewie, it's like it was just so cool to see these different people in every adventure, like have each other's back no matter what. And they literally fight every force or alien or mercenary, bounty hunter, whatever I call it, like crime lord, anything you can think of, but they do it together. And just to see like the stakes rise, at different times with like Han, for instance, right, being taken. And I think a lot of people skip that part in Return of the Jedi, like don't really think
Yeah.
about it, where they spent, it wasn't just like one movie to the next, it was like they spent like almost like a year or something like that tracking Han down. One of my favorite books is Shells of the Empire, and it just really goes to show the found family aspect. And yeah, I just think that a lot of people get that. I've had a couple of friends because of stuff with their families, their actual families, like they just don't get along with them, but every time I go back to my hometown or whatever, my home state of Michigan, we get together, hang out and do whatever, I talk to them all the time. They're, family of mine, I consider at this point. I call them uncles for my kid because they really are. And I just think that's where a lot of people like that theme of found family, because I think you have somebody at some rate, where you know, you, you know, you treat them like family, right? You maybe worked with them, went to school with them, went through some tough times together or something like you were saying. But I don't know, I think that's why people probably like your book so much, even if they don't, realize it. But they probably like those types of relationships and, don't even realize it. I know so many people that, connect with that, found family theme. And I don't think that's one of those things that gets redundant at all, because it really just reminds you of the good times, you had in the past or currently, or maybe something to have in the future with those people. So I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I think we actually already answered our next one, but I just got to go a little bit further into question 6. So how do you approach magic and magic systems in your world building?
Yeah, so I guess the inspiration for the magic was quite random, to be honest. So the I mentioned before the magic in the world is smoke-based magic,
So cool.
and I was thank you. I was trying to come up with new magic systems like back in 2019 when I was just getting started with fantasy writing again, like one of the first 2 years. And I had just read Mistborn, I had Stormlight Archive, and I read the Powder Mage, and I read a bunch of books that are quite heavy on the magic system.
Yep.
And uh, and I kind of like that sort of like video gamey almost
Yeah.
side of the Mistborn, where they're inhaling metals and they're activating the metals in their body to do that. But I always had really like a hard time believing or like picturing in my head how exactly does that happen. When you drink a solution that has diluted metals in it, it would, something that's in your stomach takes a really long time to be absorbed by your body.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, but the way that and at least the way it's portrayed in the books, it always left me confused because they're burning it consciously. They can find it within their body to burn, like at their will, but it's not really explained how they're able to do that, or like finding a way to burn it. So I was like, I was thinking like, what would be an easier way and more immediate way to activate magic with something like this? And then I came across the Powder Mage trilogy, which it's like they have the powder that they use, and
Mhm.
it's pretty crazy stuff. But and I was like, and I was at the same time when I was doing that, I was listening to lyrics from one of my favorite bands called The Sword.
Mm,
And to be honest, I don't really know what the name of the song was at this point, but it said something about sacred smoke,
mm.
and I was like, that's it, like people can inhale smoke to get magic powers, and that's where the inspiration came from. I just clicked in my head, and I started thinking about it and asking myself questions like, okay, smoke-based magic, yes, they can do that, but how exactly would they do that? And like, what would be the consequences for magic users? Is it sort of like unlimited power, or does it have limitations? What happens if they don't have smoke? Like, how do you inhale smoke while you're like in on the battlefield or something, right? So I came up with the concept of burning specific kinds of herbs in a little
Oh, that's cool.
pouch in that you can carry on your belt. And I invented a sort of oil that doesn't really need fire to ignite herbs. So like if you
Oh,
could
that's
rub it
cool.
in with a little bit of friction, it can still burn. So that's very convenient in a way to avoid needing fire or something like that. But yeah, so I started like asking myself questions about, okay, what are the flaws and how do I get over the flaws, until I came up with the complete concept for what the smoke smiths are, and what they do, and how they get their magic. And then in terms of world building, I try to really connect everything, connect the setting with the characters, with the magic, and with the plot. I think for me, like I always find that the best stories are the ones that connect everything together.
Yeah.
Because some books are really good at character work, but when you're really good at character work, then your plot sometimes loses its momentum, where you know maybe like it's a meandering story because all you have is characters
Yep.
talking to each other and developing. And then what can happen as well a lot of the times is when you dedicate a lot of time to your world building and to your exploration of magic, then you end up with shallow characters because you don't have enough quiet moments where they can kind of develop and things like that. So for me, the best thing to do is basically connect the entire plot with the character arcs of the characters. And because the characters are magic users, or at least some of them are, and or at least they're exposed to this magic pretty much with everything that they do. The magic is always around them, and there's always characters that can use it, or characters that can threaten these characters with the magic. So it's always everything is always connected. And sometimes in the beginning of the book, maybe it's not super obvious how it's all going to connect, but I'd like to do it in a way that it's all connected, and at the end of the book it feels very satisfying to the reader, because all the plot threads that I was starting and all the character arcs come to fruition in kind of sort of like an explosive end, where like you get all these revelations, you get big battle, and you get you understand the characters better. The characters sort of like conquer their own fears or their own flaws, and like, conquer their enemies, maybe something like that. So for me, that's my approach for crafting the magic in the world building, is making sure that it's all relevant. Because then I mean, what's the point of having magic if the magic is just for aesthetics, or what's the point of having an expansive world that you have a big map and at the forefront of your book, which you don't really explore in the sense of like having characters come from all these different places, or if like that's fine as well. Like you can have very self-contained stories with maybe urban fantasy, or even within epic fantasy, you can have self-contained stories. But for me, the stories that I always like to read are the ones that do this really, really well. And one of them, I think it's just in terms of the way it's plotted, for me, it's one of the best, is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I find that he has really strong and complex characters, but at the same time, he has so many plot lines that he's juggling at the same time. And he's got a crazy amount of magic systems. He's got his own fantasy creatures. He's got his own world building going on, and he's got some mystery subplots in between as well. And it's a bit of romance too. So it's like, for me, like seeing how he juggles everything and how it's possible to have all of this stuff coming together in a book. For me, that has been one of the biggest inspirations. And I wish I could be at least 1% successful compared to how successful he is. Yeah.
Yeah, he does a really good job. We're reading The Way of Kings right now for book club, and I've listened to those lectures a lot. I just go back to them every couple months. They're just I've talked about them on here a lot. If you guys aren't listening to Brandon Harrison's lectures from BYU, then I don't know what you're doing with your time, honestly, when you're not writing or reading. Yeah, he does such a great job, putting those ideas together in such a good way. But I think that's the same thing as like he can do the same thing in his lectures, take all these huge topics and shrink them down. But then he also, like you were saying, like there's a lot going on. I think he's got both sides of the spectrum down, if that makes sense, with those abilities, which makes even more impressive. Usually a lot of us are just trying to do one or the other, right? But I don't know if it's because he's so used to breaking down his world building, into simple words or what, that it allows him to do that breadth. I loved Warbreaker. I thought Warbreaker was absolutely phenomenal. I actually like that more than Outlaw of Law. I read the first book. I read Mistborn. I was a little disappointed with that one because I thought it was going to be a heist, and then it wasn't quite a heist. So yeah, I still enjoyed it, but not as much as like Warbreaker. But yeah, he just does so many things, and it's crazy because I feel like between those books and then Outlaw of Law and um, Way of Kings, like they're all supposed to be fantasy, but really I could say that like Isle of Law to me is like steampunk slash fantasy. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
just also then he does epic fantasy. Then he'll do like Warbreaker to me was like just kind of straight fantasy or classic fantasy, I would say, and with like a twist. But yeah, he just does an amazing job switching
yeah,
it up with different flavors in, you know, the genre. But yeah, his ability to take all those things and just like thread them together and still make it work really well is just like astounding to me. I've never seen anybody do that, honestly. Even
yeah,
within, you know, um,
yeah.
like
I will
epic
say
fan,
that
you know, like
I
Terry
will
Good
say that
character
one thing
have like,
one-
you know,
yeah,
it's crazy.
I will say one thing I don't like so much about him, and that's something I try to get from other people, is the character work is good, it's really solid, but I tend to like the characters to be a bit more gritty and a bit
Mm,
more like not so nice as people, like something, some people I wouldn't really want to have a coffee with or something like that. And so I got some from for my characters, I actually I'm a lot more inspired by sort of the grim dark authors like uh, maybe Joe Abercrombie, for example. I think he does phenomenal character work, and he also has this kind of grittiness and a bit of the kind of sarcastic and dark humor as well, like, which I found really hilarious whenever I read his books. And I tried to get a little bit of that as well. Maybe in book two, people are going to see a lot more of this sort of like self-deprecating humor a bit more than in Seeds. And Seeds, like it was kind of a serious book. Like I didn't really have too much humor in it. Book two, I think it's a bit more of a mixed bag.
that's cool. I do have to say, like, I liked Kaladin more at the start, and then now, like, because I'm still, or we're still like, I think we're about to be on, like chapter 10 and 12, or we just got over 10, 11 and 12. Um, yeah, but now it's like, mm, I don't know, not so much. My buddy's like, you'll like him again later if that makes sense. I'm like, I hope so. But I do agree, like the like Warbreaker, I love so much because you had like a really good character. She's trying to figure out what to do. You had two of them, like two sisters, and then like I would say like the other good guy, if that makes sense. Yeah, he's like very just like screw you kind of thing, like just like kind of doing his own thing. And then at the end, it was like you could kind of see where everybody ended up, and even like the villains. And there was such a wide range of, you know, it felt like a D&D book, you know, or a campaign, you know. And I just thought he did, I thought that's why I liked it. I think he did such a good job. Like the world building was really cool. But he did like smaller things. The magic system was really cool, but to me it was probably, you know, one of the easier ones out of like Mistborn or Way of Kings or anything like that. Um, but yeah, there was a lot to learn there, I think, through any of those, you know, novels by him. And like I said, you know, we talked already about, you know, his classes at BYU where he explains things a little further. I think it definitely will help a lot of people out. But yeah, but you said like inspiration, I think is, you know, just really key. I got from urban fantasy, I love Patricia Briggs. She's like one of my favorites. Her and Kevin Hearn are kind of always like neck and neck for me. Jim Butcher, of course, but yeah, I read a lot of other urban fantasy. Like Lindsay Broker, I had one. Hammered was like absolutely amazing. And it's definitely my kind of thing where, like you were saying, the main character is like really good, but she also does some things that are not so good sometimes. And I just really connected with her. I just felt like she was one of the most, she's supposed to be a dwarf, like half dwarf and half human, but I felt she was the most human character that in urban fantasy that I had read for a while, other than like Atticus, who's the main character of like Kevin Hearn's books. But yeah, I definitely think
Right.
it's, yeah, I think you're right though. Like inspiration, you know, really depends on, like, you know, I always say, you know, everybody says, yeah, write what you want to read. And, you know, so if you want a grittier character, I think definitely do that, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's great advice, I think. And I gotta say though, like Smokesmiths to me, like once I saw that on your blurb, I was just like, yep, sold. I don't even think I got further than that, to be honest, in your blurb. Because I connected with like the cover and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's just gonna be super cool. So I thought it was just gonna be just like, you know, another fantasy book that's cool, but Smokesmiths to me just sounds absolutely amazing. I got my mind working. Speaking of inspiration, I was like, oh, you could do this or this or this, and then after a while, it looked like Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny with like, you know, all the ideas up. He looks like a crazy person, but yeah, it sounds really cool. I'm excited for that. Speaking of characters, though, who is one character you would like to meet from your books? And if you could ask them one question, what would it be?
Um, I would probably go with my sort of like, I don't know if I would call him the antagonist. And the reason I would so his name is Orberesis, is like the sort of like the villain. I wouldn't call him a villain, but he's sort of the less redeemable one from all of them. And the reason I would pick him is because he's the weakest. He's not very physically strong, doesn't know how to fight. So I know that I would probably not be in danger if I met him.
Feel safe
um,
enough, yeah.
exactly, yeah. And I guess what I would ask him is like, who hurt you?
That's a
Could
great
be,
question.
why are you the way you are? It's like obviously I know who hurt him, but I would
Yeah,
still like to hear it from him just so he could self-reflect a little bit.
that's fine. That's got to be the best answer. I've asked this like 12 times, I think, the last 2 years. It's got to be the best answer I've gotten. I always think of like Michael Scott from The Office with like Toby, like, why are you the way that you are? So
Yeah, that's
that's just that's a great answer or a great question to ask that character. It's awesome.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, obviously, like I know why he is the way he is, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like he's got his own past, and it's like, but at the same time, other people have hard pasts, and that doesn't make them assholes. So it's
yeah. No, totally. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's
so
also too interesting because if you think about it, right, and a lot of times people do that for novellas, is to try to connect those kind of things because you know their past. But I had an author I was talking to a while back, and we were talking about like, do you really know that person? Because really, I think a lot of characters, you might know particular times, and you might have like footnotes of these different things that happen, but really at the end of the day, like you just created someone. So I feel like there's a lot there that you still have to know. One of my greatest stories I've ever heard is
yeah.
Robert E. Howard was writing Conan, and a lot of people were like, "Why don't you write them in order?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just like he goes, inspiration comes to me when I write that story." He's like, "It could be any of these time periods in his life. He could be old, trying to take over back Samaria, or young, just leaving. And it was interesting because he said sometimes he talks to me and like a friend, right, and says, "Hey, did I ever tell you about that one time?" And then he tells me, and then I write that down. And his friend actually saw him sometimes out at his house in the country, and he would just be like staring off into space, and then he'd write, and then he'd stare off into space, and he'd write. And he said it's almost like Conan was standing there telling him one of these stories.
Mm.
And for me, that was just so cool because, and I think it really goes to that concept, right? When you create a character, or really they're a person, like, there's so many things that you could delve into or write about them, just like the one character, whether they're good, bad, or in between. So I think you really hit the nail on the head there that, there's sometimes you see maybe vital timeline points, like a friend's explaining stuff to you or you're sharing or whatever. But again, like I've had my best friend, I think it's like 17 years, 18 years. Like pretty soon they'll be able to drink, and not just drive. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because then, like I know a lot about him, but sometimes there's something that pops up where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, tell me that. And I feel like you could totally do that with any of your characters, or any of us could at any point. So, and I think it's kind of
Yeah,
interesting when you kind of, analyze it that way. I think that's where a lot of people, get novellas and things like that from, but just to fill in the
yeah,
gaps for those people. But yeah. Well, that was a great answer. So we're just wrapping up on time here. So just want to make sure we saved a good chunk for you here to talk, about what you have in the future. So do you have any news, updates, or current projects that you can share with us?
yeah, for sure. So I mentioned before that I have book two, very close to the finish line. I'm not really sure about. I don't. This is something. It's a problem for me, but it's my own problem because like I don't like to promise people dates for releases
Yep, I
because
get that. Yep.
yeah, that's way too much pressure, and I still don't know if the editor is going to come around with the book and say you need to rewrite this entire thing. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I hope it doesn't happen, and I can plan for what happens if the book's okay. But if he tells me that the book is bad, then I need to completely rewrite the book, and then my promise to the readers is already broken. So, and I really
Yeah,
really
timeline's up.
really
Yep.
don't like to break those promises. So but anyway, I've got book two that's supposed to come out in a few months. It shouldn't be too much longer. At least the pre-orders and the cover reveal should be very soon. And then I will have another prequel novella that's going to be just set maybe like 10, 15 years before the events of Seeds of War. Because my other novella, The Ruins of Smoke, that one is set quite a long time before the events of Seeds
Oh,
of
cool.
War. It's more of a lore and kind of history of the world kind of story. So the characters are all different. It tackles everything else, but I'm planning one that's with all the characters from Seeds of War and from the main series. It's sort of like you were mentioning before. It's like the exploration of their backstories and what made
That's
them the
cool.
way they are, and what were the main events
Yeah.
within their lifetime that you know made them the way that they are. And that one should be out if I'm able to keep on schedule. That should be out late 2024. So maybe, I don't know, like October, November, something like that. And I will also be working on book three, I think right away, right
Oh,
after
cool.
that. And maybe some other stories, maybe some other novellas or other novels from other genres or things that are completely unrelated to the series, to the main series, the Smokesmiths. Uh, it's interesting because I have so many ideas and I have so many unfinished novels on my computer, and I've got so many first drafts that I've never touched. I've got first drafts of sci-fi novels, horror
Oh, that's cool.
novels. And I'd like to do something with them. I think
Yeah.
some of them are good, or they have promise. So maybe I'll just find some time within 2023 and just get some of them out in the world. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have planned for 2024, really. Like um I've got also like some plans for my audiobook to come out for Seeds of
Oh,
War.
cool.
Again, I still don't have a date, but I've just actually gotten an audition from a very cool narrator that I enjoyed a lot. So I might start working on that really, really soon. It's not
Oh, that's
something I
awesome.
can obviously tell people yet, again, for the same reasons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but that's kind of my plans.
Isn't it? I just always find it funny because when people are like, oh, I just have a few things out, but like I had mentioned to people, I'm like, yeah, I have three novellas, and then I have at least like my sword and sorcery kind of thing on Kindle Vella, that'll be coming out too this year. And I was just like, oh, it's not very much. People are like, it's a lot of products. I'm like, I don't know, maybe, but it's funny with versus traditional, right? It's like what you just said could be like 4 years, that you're
Yeah,
working on this prequel novella, things like that, or two even, and then book two and three, like we were talking about that with Luke, and then I was also talking about that with like Adrian, MJ, and Andy Pelican the other day too. So I always find it funny. Indie authors like, yeah, I don't have much going on. It's like literally could be 6 years for some people, in terms of like traditionally published. But it's
yeah,
just always fun to me when I have people traditionally published on here versus not, that's like the one thing they complain about, is like not having the ability to, release so many things. So I always want to point that out to people in the audience. Like, if you have a few things, even two things, even one thing, right? If it's a novella or a book, like that's usually
yeah,
more than people have traditionally published. And that is, I think, one of the strong suits for us is as soon as you're done with something, you can just, make sure it's done well, but then put it out. You don't have to wait on anybody. I think that's my favorite thing. But that's all I spent NaNoWriMo on was like three outlines, but I had it so detailed, like 1 to like 40 or 45 chapters. I got three major outlines done, and I'm like, oh, I'll just pick these up whenever. And now I can actually run through them. So I think that's always smart to
yeah.
get an
That's really
outline
cool.
done, especially if it's detailed, like you were saying
Yeah,
earlier, when you can. But well, that's awesome. Like I said, and for you and our audience, again, like you were saying, it's kind of hard to determine. My life has been crazy. Love it with my little one, but been crazy. But Seeds of War is definitely on my TBR for 2024. I do have a video coming out for the channel and for our audio as well, some audio stuff. Um, but I will let everybody know, including you, when that is ready to go, and I'll be sharing that with everybody. I think I have like 10 reviews ready to go, and then yours will be like number 11, which is really exciting. But I just want to remind our audience, to check out Seeds of War. Any books by you, make sure that they're, checking them out, reviewing them, sharing them. I was just talking on last Sunday about this in the masterclass with TBRCon, that like we all thrive, particularly the indie community, on shares, likes, reviews, anything like that, follows, stuff like that. So just want to remind you that every author needs those. Thank you so much for coming on today. I've been wanting, like I said, wanting to get you on, since last year when I found, book one. And then when I saw your prequel novella and I read that blurb, I was like, yeah, I bought that one too right away. I'm I'm not a big hesitator when it's a book I know I'm gonna like. I feel like I know flavors now. But it feels really good to get to talk to you. I look forward to, talking to you with book 2 and 3 and any of the prequel novellas that you have coming out too. But like I said before, if there's anything else I can do for you, just email it, message me, send it to me, and we will get it out to all of our channels and on here, and we'd love to share and help you out as much as possible. So
Yeah, thank you very much, man. That it was a pleasure to talk to you about my books and my journey, and just chat with you in general. It's been really,
yeah.
really nice.
No, it's great. I learned a lot myself, which is why I, continue to do this. On top of trying to help people, it's just always fun to, before my writing sessions or editing to, to get to talk to somebody else. It kind of just feels like it's like reformation, if that makes sense. Just, helping each other out, even just being there, even if it's virtually, it just kind of feels like I'm not doing it alone, if that makes sense. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, I really appreciate coming on today. And like I said, if you, want to come on at any point in the future, this spring and summer, I'll actually between season 3 and 4, I'll actually be doing some seminars, and I actually know quite a few people that I think you would mesh really well with. And I'll be sending you guys like a topic or something like that, or a couple, and then we'll come together for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just discuss and chit chat and have some fun. So if you're interested in that, I can send you
yeah,
an email for
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, sounds
Cool.
good to me. Yeah,
Well, I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I hope to talk to you at least on social media soon, my friend.
yeah, sounds good. Let's keep in touch for sure.
Sounds good. We have a good rest of the day, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, you too. Bye, man.
Thanks. See you later. Bye.